what is the equivalent Sony camera to the Canon RP and the Canon R cameras, mirrorless cameras? But if you're in this boat and you're thinking, you know what, I've looked at the Canons, but what would be equivalent Sony cameras to these? We're going to find what's the most equivalent. I've got the specs up here. I'm going to share them with you and we can see. So you will be aware that EOS R mirrorless camera, you're looking at $1,900-ish. And this is going to be the higher megapixel version. You're looking at 30 megapixels. And the RP is the lower megapixel camera. And continuous photos, you get more on this camera than you do on the RP. We did that in our separate video, which will link up in the cards. You can check that out to see what the differences are between the Canon RP and the Canon R mirrorless cameras. But here we're looking at the mirrorless. So let's say, based on quick information, I think the Canon EOS R is very equivalent to the A7 III. So why? Well, they released about 2018, and price wise they're interesting. You'll notice that A7 III comes in at over $2,000. You're looking at $2,200, and you're close to $1,900 with the EOS R. So what are you getting for that extra money? Is it just the name, or is there something to it? Well, that's why we made this video for you. We're going to compare the specs and see what is what. They're both SLR style mirrorless cameras, and they're magnesium alloy bodies, which means you get like a professional feel body and a bit more sturdy. The megapixels, pretty not excellent, but pretty close. We're looking at 30 megapixels on the EOS R versus the 24 megapixels on the A7. That 24 megapixel is more close to the Canon EOS RP camera. However, looking through the additional specs, there are image stabilizations built into the A7 III, which the EOS R does not have. The EOS R has an option in camera for image stabilization, but it actually introduces a crop into your camera. So you're gonna have to turn it on and you actually get like a 1.5 crop. It's not the best way of doing it, but if you've got no other image stabilization on your lens and you're adapting an old EF lens to the R camera, it's something to think about having. But the Sony's is better, because obviously that's a better stabilization. But in terms of additional details, the EOS R has a fully articulating screen, so if you're doing vlogging or you want to see yourself, the EOS has that. The A7 is only a tilting screen. In addition to that, what else are we saying? Video, shall we jump straight to video? We'll do frames. So the EOS R can take 8 photos per second continuously, and the A7 III can take 10 photos. Now video wise, I want to jump onto video. They're kind of similar. That's where the main similarities are. You've got the 4K at 30 frames a second on the EOS R, and the A7 has that as well. However, you're looking at slow motion, you can look at 1080p at 120 on the A7 III, and the EOS R, we're going to look at this in more detail because we do have an option here for 4K at 120 frames a second. So that'll be very interesting. Let's look into that in more detail. Okay, after a bit more looking into this, I noticed there's a bit of a mistake here on the DP review listing. EOS R can shoot at 30 frames a second in 4K. You can do 60 frames a second in 1080p. And if you go into prehistoric age and do 720p, you can do 120 frames a second there. So in terms of video, it's not the best. So in that example, we are better with the A7 III. However, remember, there is a difference in price. Is it worth you paying the extra $1,400 for the A7? Well, that's something you're going to have to decide. You have to look through the Sony specs and see what you like about Sony and the Canon. But this is some extra information to help you along your journey. I've made some more detailed videos about these comparisons, so make sure to check out the playlist, which will be linked here.